By way of introduction, I should say my better half, Donna and I have been married 30 years. And actually, we grew up together in Milwaukee. I grew up in an orphanage in Milwaukee. I had no mother, no father. And I went to grade school and high school with Donna. We went to school in Madison together at the university. Later, I was a university student at Madison, and I caught a marijuana charge, and they couldn't charge me in Madison, so they charged me in Charleston, South Carolina, and I went to trial in the Strom-Thurmond courthouse, and I faced 150 years in federal prison on a marijuana case where there was no marijuana, no possession, no sale. And I was this, hippie from Madison who they suspected was the financier of a large marijuana operation. They had no evidence, and they don't need evidence. Anyway, I faced 150 years on 10 counts. Each count's 15 years. I was found innocent on 9 counts and guilty on 1. It means 9 times I'm innocent, 1 time I'm guilty. And I fought the case to appellate court and then to the U.S. Supreme Court. So it's all in the law books. And I went to federal prison for 9 years. Again, I was a first offender. The feds don't like it when you don't cooperate and testify against your friends. In my case, they wanted me to testify against kids I grew up with in the orphanage. And I said no. So I got 9 years for that. As things turned out, life is strange that way. Even the worst of life, sometimes something good comes of it. When I went to prison, I had 4 years of college. At UW-Madison, I had academic scholarship. I was a straight A student. In fact, I went to prison after I lost the Supreme Court case. They sent me to prison during final exams of my very last semester because the judge didn't want me to graduate. So it was like December, and they sent me to federal prison. And because I had fought the case to the Supreme Court, I went directly to maximum security. I ended up doing time in 9 different federal prisons in 8 different states, including 4 of the toughest prisons in the world, including Leavenworth and Marion. Today I'm going to introduce these books and then go to the first book, but some of you have read Behind Bars, you may have looked at Beyond Bars. Behind Bars, these books, actually Penguin asked me, Penguin's the biggest publisher in the world, they asked me to write these books. These are 2 of the best-selling books on the subject matter that have ever been published. Short of maybe Norman Mallard's book, In the Belly of the Beast. These books have been translated into French and Spanish and German. I even found a Chinese knockoff of these books. Behind Bars, if you know anybody going to prison, and that you may know some people that go to jail or prison, this is the book they should have before they go. Or for example, if you know somebody that's getting into trouble, it might be a teenager. Most people that go to jail or prison are young people. Regardless of race or gender, I should say, 90% of prisoners are male. In Wisconsin, 50% of the prisoners are African American or Latino. They're about 10 times as likely. African Americans, Latinos are 10 times as likely in Wisconsin to go to prison. The minority population of Wisconsin is about 4 or 5%, but the prison population is 50. So, if you know anybody getting into trouble and they won't listen to maybe adults, you give them this book. It's easy to read. It's written for people that they should read it before they go to jail or prison. It might very well save their life. This book you read in prison as preparation to get out. In fact, the Wisconsin Department of Corrections, when this book came out, they bought a couple boxes of books and they distributed them to all the wardens at all the state prisons to read this. So anytime, I go into a lot of prisons. I'm invited into almost every state prison in Wisconsin. And I've been running prison programs for 25 years. And here in Wisconsin, I've been running a program called Inviting Convicts to College at Tachita and at Oshkosh Correctional Institution. I've been supervising that program for 12 years now. And I've been asked to run the program at other state prisons too, but I'm sorry I can't do all that, you know. I use my students to teach a course called Convict Criminology, where they read this book and they read this book. And the course is in preparation for getting out of prison to go to university. You know, they have a pipeline from high school to prison. I'd like to have a new pipeline that went from prison to university. And so these two books, Behind Bars and Beyond Bars, for these two books, they're written, I remember my Penguin publisher, they told me, they said, Dr. Richards, they said short words, short sentences, and short paragraphs. They said, picture somebody on a subway in New York reading this book, you know? And that's what it means to have a mass market paperback. It's written for the general public to read. For these two books, I invented these two fictional characters, Joe Convict and Jill Convict. And Joe Convict, I pictured him being in Leavenworth, the United States Penitentiary, Leavenworth, a prison I know well as I've done time there. And for Jill Convict, I pictured her being in Tachita, which I've never done time there, but I've been there for 10 or 12 years many times. So these two books I'm going to talk about behind bars, but I also want to tell you this is a book I'm probably most proud of. It came out in 2002. It is a classic academic monologue. It's the introduction for our group that we call the Convict Criminology Group. I started this group in 1997, along with about 10 or 12 other people. We're all ex-cons and we're all professors of criminology and criminal justice. We're mostly from the United States, but we include other people from Australia, New Zealand, United Kingdom, Finland, Russia, Belgium, Norway, and France. The reason most of us are Americans is because the United States has by far the largest prison population in all of human history. So there's more of us. Also in Europe, for example, most of the people in Europe, for example, drugs pretty much, nobody goes to jail or prison for drugs unless they're a heroin addict. Nobody goes to prison in Europe for marijuana. I mean, it's unheard of. In most countries, they don't even arrest you. In a few countries, they arrest you and give you a fine for marijuana. In most European prisons, the only people in prisons are probably the people who belong there. And the reason why we have prisons. The people are there because they're dangerous to society. There are people that have committed homicide or rape or armed robbery, serious crimes, crimes for which people should be locked up. Because if you didn't lock them up, they might commit more crimes of a serious nature and hurt more people. So in Europe, they have very small prison populations because literally there are very few people who commit those kinds of crimes. In the United States, on the other hand, our criminal justice system, which is sort of like the Pentagon and the military-industrial system, has gotten so big. And think about this, because I know most of you are well-educated and very thoughtful. As they closed the factories, the deindustrialization of America in the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, as they closed the prisons, closed the factories, they opened more prisons. So in 1970, there were only 300,000 people in jail and prison in the entire United States, 300,000. Today it's 2.3 million. The federal system, when I was a federal prisoner in the 1980s, had only 30,000 federal prisoners. Today it's 230,000. California has like 190,000. Texas, 150,000. Wisconsin, about 25. Today in the United States, over 7 million Americans. Again, 90% of them are male. Over 50% are minority. 7 million Americans today, at this moment, are in custody, meaning they're on probation, in jail, in prison, or on parole. 7 million. Think of it this way, 3.5 million black men. 1/3 of the black male population in America. 1/3. 1 out of 3 black men, adult men, 1 out of 3 adult men is on probation, jail, prison, or parole. So it is the new slave system. It's not just the new Jim Crow, it's the new slave system. It's not, and I'm not just saying that rhetorically. In prisons, they have factories. In Wisconsin, we have something called Badger Industries. It makes license plates, also makes furniture, maybe the chairs you're sitting on. It always amazes me at the university that my colleagues at the university that are so educated and liberal don't even realize that most of the furniture in their offices was manufactured by prisoners. They don't even know it. They don't even know that when they walk down the hallway and they see upholstered chairs, for example, couches, they were all done by Wisconsin prisons. Most Americans don't realize that there's like 1,000 prisons in America. Not all of them, but many if not most of them, have a factory inside where people work for 10 cents an hour, 20 cents an hour, basically at gunpoint. Most Americans don't know that. In fact, in California, they're making auto parts for Toyota inside a California prison. Much of the military-industrial complex now makes parts for the military inside prisons. When I was a head clerk at Oxford Correctional Institution, that's the federal prison here in Wisconsin, the last prison I did time in. At that prison, I was the head clerk, head inmate clerk of an electronics factory that made electronic cable for the U.S. Air Force, Army, and Navy, including for tanks and helicopters and submarines. And we were paid 25 cents an hour. So these are slave factories is what they are. So, Counter Criminology is a book that I'm most proud of in that my basic work the last 25 years, other than I've worked at 5 universities, I've been tenured at 2, I'm a full professor, I just retired in January, unexpectedly, after a car accident. I live in Fond du Lac, and I was hit by a head-on collision on my way to work. I was driving to Oshkosh and along Highway 45, and a pickup truck crossed the yellow line and smashed into me at 55 miles an hour. So that put me into retirement. But the last 25 years, I've taught classes at universities. I've written altogether 6 books. I'm almost done with my 7th. If my head clears from the concussion, maybe I'll actually finish it. And I've published over 100 scholarly articles. I'm arguably probably the best published criminologist in the state of Wisconsin. Easily. The conduct criminology book, I'm most proud of it because it's about ex-cons becoming grad students, becoming professors. And this has been my main work, has been mentoring and advising convicts who come out of prison and go to college like anybody else. And it's interesting, because they're convicted felons, they get a bachelor's degree and they still can't get a job. So why not continue, right? Go and get a master's, then go get a PhD. And then they become professors. And that's been my major work. And what I'm most proud of, I've literally advised and mentored prisoners all the way from prison, where they first, I received a letter from them while they were still in prison. And I sent them a reading list, told them what I wanted them to read, and advised and mentored them. And today they're professors at universities all over the country. Now, why is that important? Well, it helps, to help somebody is important to me, as it is to most of you. But it's also important to challenge this prison industrial system that we have. And who best to do that but ex-cons with PhDs? Because we know from what we're talking about better than anybody else. So those are the people I've been helping. And many of them are Black, Latino. Right now I've got 3 women who are PhD students that are ex-cons. So that's been my major work. The last book I just finished a year ago, The Marion Experiment. Alcatraz, the United States Penitentiary Alcatraz, closed in 1962. Its replacement was the United States Penitentiary Marion, which opened in 1963 and became the first supermax prison built in America. And it became the model for the supermax prisons all over the world. It became the model for Abu Ghraib in Iraq, for Guantanamo, Gitmo in Cuba. I was a prisoner there in 1986. It's a prison that has 270 cells, and there's no cafeteria, there's no yard, there's no dining hall. You go there for at least 3 years. Most people go there to die. It's a supermax prison where every cell is solitary confinement. 24 hours a day, you're never out of your cell. That's where they send the politicals. That's where they send the Black Panthers, the communists, the terrorists, the people they want to get rid of. They can't execute them because they haven't, now they can under federal law, but they sent them to Marion. About half the prisoners are politicals, mostly left-wing. Some are right-wing, some are racist, a few might be Ku Klux Klan, but most of them are left-wingers. I was there in '86, just briefly. because they didn't know what to do with me, so they kept me in solitary for the first year I was in prison. And because my file said Supreme Court case. Why do they do that? Because when you're in prison, I want to get into the conversation of behind bars, is when you're in prison, in general, this is what people don't understand. You've got a county jail, and you drive by that, and you might know people that have spent a weekend in the county jail. Jail and prison are two different places. Prison is for convicted felons. Felony is anything over a year. And by the way, you don't have to commit a crime to be a felon. I don't think marijuana is a crime. The U.S. government felt otherwise, but I feel very strange now that marijuana is now legal, more or less, in half of the United States. But, for example, you may not know this, but if you're in a car accident and somebody dies, and you don't have to be on drugs or alcohol, you can be straight and sober. If you're in a car accident and you kill somebody, and you're at fault, which might be speeding, or you went through a red light, or a stop sign, or you crossed over the yellow line, you kill somebody. Depending on the county and the district attorney, and how crowded the courts are, you may well get charged with vehicular homicide. And so it's a car accident, right? There's no intention, don't matter anymore. And just, why is that? Insurance companies. The insurance companies lobbied all across the country, every state legislature, to change the insurance laws. That's why your car insurance is so cheap now. You never thought about that. But if, people like us, we're on Social Security, we got cheap car insurance. Right? I know you think it's because you've got such a good driving record. Well, that's part of it. But another part of it is that the insurance companies have changed the laws so that in these serious accidents where people are killed, they don't pay anything because it's a crime. And I can't tell you how many times I've been a witness in a courtroom in cases like this. But if somebody, example, in one case, a young man, he was in a car accident, he killed one person in an accident when he lost control of his father's car. In Kentucky, he got 25 years in state prison. And he did the first 5 years in a county jail because the prisons were filled. And when I went to interview him for a local attorney who wanted me to write a letter to the judge to get his sentence reduced, which never happened, but when I went to the county jail to talk to him, the young man, he said what really bothered him. He was crying in the interview room. He was crying, and he said what really bothered him was that all the people that were hurt in that accident, and there was one person killed and 3 people seriously hurt, including a mother and 2 children. He said that his insurance company would not pay any of the hospital bills. Under Kentucky law, they didn't have to because a crime was committed. If they convict somebody of a crime, the insurance companies get off scot-free. They don't pay anything. It's just like, for example, if your house burns down and you got home insurance, but the insurance company, if they can prove arson, right, they don't pay anything. A lot of people don't know that. You think your car insurance will pay for these accidents. That way insurance companies get out of paying for the largest amounts, the $1 million accidents, where people die. Insurance companies don't have to pay anything. Okay, behind bars, what's that about? When people go to prison, what I want you to understand is most of them are young, most of them most of them come from disadvantaged backgrounds. Typically, they're young men with no fathers. So when they get to be 15, 16, 17, where they no longer listen to their mother, because they got to be men, right? She might be a great single mom, but she's going to have a hard time with her boy because he's modeling himself after men, which is why they join gangs or they hang out with other delinquents. So a lot of people who go to prison are young men, 18, 19, 20. And they're dumb. They're dumb young men. They just don't know any better. And they don't have a father, a parent, to protect them and supervise them and teach them. So they make dumb mistakes, which is alcohol, drugs, the rest of it. In general, when an adult goes to prison, what happens is, it's like going to Mars. You got the free world and you got the prison world, and they're two different worlds. Once you go behind that fence or behind that wall, and it's different than being a corrections officer. A corrections officer goes there for 8 hours and goes home, and he's getting paid to do it. And it's very different being a prisoner than being a corrections officer. And I don't say this out of disrespect. It's just a reality. And by the way, in the federal joints, you have a lot of police officers, judges, lawyers, corrections officers who are prisoners. And it's a big wake-up call when they go to prison. Then they find out what the reality is like when you have to live it 24 hours a day. In the state prison, or federal prison, when you go to prison, you lose everything. You lose your marriage, you lose your children, you lose your job, you lose your home. You stay there long enough, and everybody will forget who you are. Most of what you had on the street is gone. Your furniture, your clothes, your car. It all disappears. Somebody gets it, somebody sells it, somebody claims it. Somebody claims your wife, somebody claims your children. Now, if you go to prison for a year or two, maybe you can hang on to some of that. But 5, 10 years, 20 years, forget it. You're going to lose everything. Then when you're in prison, you're subject to being treated like an animal. The food is what you would never eat. The clothes are what you would never wear. Not in Wisconsin, but in some federal prisons, for example. Do I have 5
No,
minutes?
we had agreed that we'd allow some time for questions.
Let me finish 5 minutes with that.
Yeah.
I'll just give you the worst of it. The shock. And by the way, I should say, Wisconsin has one of the better prison systems in the United States. Wisconsin, Minnesota have always been known to be that, mostly because of the people that work there. And you have a lot of people with college degrees who are corrections officers. You have a lot of people who grew up in this sort of Nordic Scandinavian culture who make good corrections employees. It was certainly better before our recent election of Governor Walker, when corrections officers had unions and much better working conditions. But the worst of it, for example, I'll just say this, I talk about this in this book, and behind bars, in Leavenworth, picture 2,500 men in a prison built for 1,200. 2,500 men all doing life sentences. Picture gun towers 50 feet high, walls 30 feet high, a wall 12 foot thick, and it goes down 20 feet into the ground. The cell blocks are 5 tiers of cages, 5 tiers high. In the wintertime, there's no heat, there's no air conditioning. It gets hot in Kansas. It gets cold in Kansas. In the wintertime, in my cell, we would be up all night doing calisthenics. and push-ups, sit-ups to stay warm. And you wear boots, you wear your clothes at night, you wear whatever. You don't have much clothes to wear, but you wear what you have. You wear you have an army coat, you have an army uniform, you wear that at night. In Leavenworth, we made armor out of newspaper. That's to protect yourself from stabbings. And so you wear this newspaper that you wear on your arms and legs and around your body, under your shirt. That gives you some protection from shivs, jabs with knives. And during the day, you do, at night, you do push-ups and sit-ups. During the day, you get out of your cell. In the cell, I say there's no heat. When you look at the cell wall, it's a concrete wall with an iron cage, an iron jailed front. The walls look like wallpaper. It looks like there's a print pattern on the wall. What they are is cockroaches, and they're frozen in the ice. And in January and February, they're frozen. And then come March or April, when it gets a little warmer, they start moving, and the ice starts melting. And there are like 3 or 4 different kinds of cockroaches. We used to have cockroach races and rat races, literally rats, in our cells. That was Leavenworth. And I'm not talking out of my hat. These are places I've done time. Leavenworth, Terre Haute, Marion. Scott wants questions here, so.
Yeah, we want to open it up